We are just shy of 1,000 miles on the 2019 Indian FTR 1200S, and this is going to be my brutally honest review of a bike I just spent a ton of money getting a hold of. As you can see, I've already replaced the mirrors with these bar end mirrors. These are not good bar end mirrors. I just wanted to see if I would like bar end mirrors. The stock mirrors are tall and narrow and not terribly useful. I found myself having to lift my arm up to see anything. Now, one of the things that people complain about with the FTR is cold idle and stuttering. So here's how I solve those problems. Turn it on, let the computer boot, put the bike in neutral. Once the gauges come up, it's a double tap on the start button. Start run. First you put it in run, then you hit it to start. It starts up every time. It idles a little bit rough. It's a big engine, 1203 cc's, and that oil coolant has to get circulating. It's got about, I think if I remember the specs correctly, it's got almost 5 quarts of oil in it, so that's a lot of oil to get moving. And here you can see there's an outdoor temperature 70 degrees and an engine temperature 79 degrees and climbing. So I sit and I let the bike idle until it gets to about 120 degrees. It takes a couple minutes, but that takes care of all the cold performance issues. And then I ride it like a normal person for about the first 5 minutes or so, instead of riding it like a maniac. I'm a little impatient today, so I'm having trouble waiting. These mirrors, by the way, not great. They're tiny, which isn't a big deal, because all they got to do is show you if cop cars are behind you, basically, right? But if you accelerate hard, or if you decelerate hard, or if you hit a bump, then they move and you have to readjust them, which you can do easily on this bike because it has cruise control. So you can set the cruise control and adjust the right mirror, and then turn off the cruise control and adjust the left mirror. So we're at 119, 121. You can see that didn't take very long, and we're going to go, and there's no stuttering, there's no stalling. We're going to take it easy for a couple minutes, and there's not going to be any problems. Now I'm at 150 degrees engine temp. I can still feel a little tiny stutter, but third gear, 43 miles an hour. I'm not really too worried about it because you shouldn't jam any motorcycle to the throttle lock within 2 minutes of starting the damn thing. So it's one of those instances where I feel people have unreasonable expectations of their motorcycle. No motorcycle performs to its peak before the engine reaches operating temperature. Operating temperature for this motorcycle is 174 degrees, and I say that because that's the temperature I see the most often. So now we're at 164, and I can actually feel it smoothing out. And the slight hesitation that's in there every few revolutions is gone, or going. So let's call that the first downside, is that you absolutely must ride the motorcycle gently at the beginning until it gets warmed up to operating temperature, and then you can start flogging it and you'll get the performance you expect from the 1203 cc liquid cooled engine that Indian built from the ground up for this bike. See, now we're 169. The hesitation, the little tiny hesitation that was in there is completely gone. And in about 8 seconds, we're going to be at 174. And I'm not going to think about it again the whole day long. It's the end of summer, end of August. As a matter of fact, it is literally the last day of August 2019. I got this bike I got it on the 28th of May, so right at the end of May. So I've been riding it through June, July, and August. I'm at 1,000 miles, almost 955. So I put 1,000 miles on it in 3 months, which is not a lot. I don't plan on putting huge miles on this bike. I plan on riding it around town, maybe taking a couple of day trips, maybe a long weekend. And that's about it. About the only things I'm going to do to it, and I'll address that in this, as I said, brutally honest review as I go along. So let me start with the things that I absolutely hate about this motorcycle. There is one thing that I absolutely hate about this motorcycle. I think it is quite common amongst motorcycle manufacturers, and the further outside the medium range that they expect their riders to be size-wise, the worse this is, and that is the stock seat. Now, most of my experience is with BMW motorcycles. I think everybody knows that. I have owned Hondas and Kawasaki's from the 70s. I have owned Hondas and Suzuki's from the 90s. In 2001, I got into my first BMW. I've owned BMWs ever since then. I had a KTM 990 Adventure for a hot minute, and now I have this Indian FTR 1200S. I can say, with one exception, that this is the worst seat, stock seat, I have ever had on a motorcycle. And that one exception is the seat that was on my 1996 Honda Shadow. That seat was terrible. That seat was so bad. Oh my goodness, I can't even, I'm starting to twitch. My left leg is starting to twitch just thinking about that seat. But let me tell you what's wrong with this seat. The padding is, the foam is thin at best. And it takes about 10 minutes, maybe 15, 20 on the outside for my butt to start hurting. The foam compresses, I go straight down to the seat pan, and that's it for the rest of the day. I am not comfortable. Now, it's helped by the ergonomics, because the ergonomics from the factory are almost perfect for me. I'm 6'2" and a little bit, definitely over 6'3" once I put shoes or boots on. The reach to the handlebars is fine. The reach to the pegs is a little aggressive. You know, I can tell after doing 150 or so miles in a day, my right knee starts to ache a little bit, and that's my knee that has arthritis in it. My right hip starts to ache a little bit, and that is my hip that, you guessed it, has arthritis in it. So maybe because of the arthritis, I'm not exactly the target market for this motorcycle. Wow, inside of my face shield is really foggy. The hand to hip to foot ratios are pretty decent, and I got no complaints about those except for the shitty seat. I mean, really, you guys have to experience this. To be somebody who weighs a good bit, to get on this seat is really just, it's just miserable. But I wanted to ride it for 1,000 miles without making any changes to it, other than the mirrors, because that's safety. because it was important to me to experience the motorcycle as the folks at Indian wanted it to be experienced from the beginning. So the only thing I've added to the bike is bobbins on the swing arm, because it doesn't have a center stand, which I'm going to gripe about because I'm in the negative portion of the review. I'm going to gripe that the bike doesn't have a center stand. Now, that comes from a place, remember, I'm used to riding BMWs, and those pretty much, unless it is a pure D bona fide, meant for the track sport bike, every BMW used to come with a center stand. Now that's changed recently as they've tried to drive the cost of bikes down, because center stands cost money. They offer them now as accessories that cost, $300 or whatever. But there isn't even a place to hook up a side stand on this bike, which is fine. It's meant to be kind of a hooligan bike, kind of a sport bike. And sport bikes don't generally have center stands. But I tell you, they are so convenient when you have to do maintenance, and this is a chain-driven bike, so you have to do maintenance. It's hard to overlook them, and it's easy to gripe when the bike is not equipped with one. So there I've kind of addressed the three things that I see as negatives or downsides with the FTR 1200S. The initial running when the bike is cold, first start of the day, and again, easy to work yourself through that. Let the bike warm up a little bit, and then ride it easy till it reaches the operating temperature. You can see now it's at 173. That's about where it stays during normal operation, even on a hot day. The medieval torture device that Indian calls the stock seat, the mirrors, which were basically useless. So let's see. Well, let me redefine the list. What is it? A cold start, early running, mirrors, seat. Oh my God, the seat. I mean, I can't even tell you how much the seat sucks. Oh, and you know what? Let me talk about something else that people complain about while I'm being brutally honest here. Another thing people complain about, along with the cold start / first 3 minutes performance, is the heat. So on a bike like this, it has a V-twin engine. The front cylinder is going to be up in front of your knees. The rear cylinder is going to be back between your thighs. It's going to be under your butt. It's going to be under your wedding tackle, shall we say. And you are going to feel that heat on your thighs, the backs of your thighs. And on a really hot day, or if you're in traffic, stop and go, you are going to feel that heat on your reproductive area, shall we say. Guess what? It's a V-twin. It's a internal combustion engine. It's going to get hot. The front cylinder gets more air. Air helps cool the engine. Even though it's a liquid-cooled engine, air always helps. So the rear cylinder is always going to feel hotter to you than the front cylinder. Stop crying about it. I have yet to reach a point where the heat was so unbearable that I felt I had to get off the bike, or that if I didn't start moving, I was going to start to get burns on my thighs or something like that. The exhaust pipes cross next to your right leg, or your right calf. There's a heat shield for when you, as we're about to do, reach a stop and have to put your foot down. Now, if you don't need to put both feet down, or if you can't put both feet down, I don't find the bike difficult to flat foot with both feet, but like I said, I'm 6'2 plus. If you don't have to put your right foot down, don't put your right foot down. You're not going to feel the heat. If you do have to put your right foot down, there's a heat shield that covers, I think it's carbon fiber or something. It's nice. It looks good. And it's exactly placed where your right leg would touch the pipes if it wasn't there. I don't find it to be uncomfortable at all. As a matter of fact, on a cool morning like this, the heat from the rear cylinder is kind of nice. It warms up the seat pan, warms up the seat foam. Now, is it fantastic on a 90-plus degree day when you've been on the bike for 3 hours? No, it's not fantastic. But it's a V-twin engine. What do you expect? The rear cylinder is going to get hot. If you don't want to feel the heat from a V-twin engine, don't buy a V-twin engine. Now that I have spent some time, number one, addressing what I feel are goofy gripes from a lot of FTR 1200 owners, that dude totally just watched me. He's standing there with his wife, and his neck about snapped as he watched me ride by. So number one, I've addressed what I feel are not, I don't want to say goofy, that was rude, because everybody's entitled to their opinion, even if I disagree with them. So I don't want to invalidate other people's concerns just because I don't have the same concerns. But let me say what I feel are inappropriate, unrealistic expectations of the motorcycle that lead to complaints. And I've addressed the two things that I feel are incredibly strong weaknesses for this motorcycle: the seat and the mirrors. Especially the seat. Easily addressed by an aftermarket seat or by having your seat worked on by a competent professional. Both of which options I plan on pursuing. I'll start with the competent professional, because that's liable to cost less money up front. Oh, you know what? I thought of another thing people complain about, and I'll put up some pictures of it in the video right here. And that's the huge chunk of metal holding up the license plate. And there's already been brisk business, both homemade and professional made, of tail tidies to move the license plate and the accompanying light, which is regulation in most of the states that I'm aware of. It certainly is in Virginia, where I live. And the rear turn signals. And I'll admit, it ain't the prettiest thing on the face of the earth. But I see it for about 8 seconds when I pull the bike out of my shed. And then I get on the bike and I ride away and I never look at it again. And I don't care what the license plate is held up by, because I'm looking down the front of the motorcycle. I'm looking off the front of the motorcycle, and I don't really care. Now, it does look like it's heavy. I haven't taken it off to see what it weighs. I would imagine that piece of metal itself probably weighs in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 3 to 5 pounds. So it is unsprung weight. Removing it and replacing it with a piece of plastic or aluminum or something like that to mount your plate and your turn signals would affect the handling a little bit. But I'm a big dude. I'm not going to benefit too much from something like that, so I'm just not going to worry about it. But I do admit that it is probably not the prettiest thing on the motorcycle. Hey, there's a dog. It is definitely not the prettiest thing on the motorcycle, and I can see why people gripe about it and want to replace it. I'm not going to replace it because I just don't care. I am going to replace the seat, or at least, at the very least, have it worked on, because damn. Now let's go through the bike system by system, and we'll start with the brakes since I just had to use them pretty good. Of course, I am probably speeding, so I shouldn't complain too much. Let's start with the brakes. This motorcycle has 2 discs up front and 1 disc in the rear. The pedal is well placed. The brake lever is adjustable, both for reach and rotation. If you saw one of the entries in my visual owner's manual, then you know how to adjust the rotation of the brake lever. It's very easy. The brakes are fantastic. The brakes are just fantastic. The anti-lock brake system works fantastic. I took it out to a local high school that is obviously, it's summertime, so it's closed. But I went out on a Saturday when there was pretty much guaranteed nobody to be there. And I ran the bike hard in the parking lot until I was confident I understood when the ABS would kick in, under what conditions, and what it would feel like. The pulsing is not unpleasant. It is a little alarming the first time because, you know, you're not used to it. The rear wheel will still lock up sometimes. And I encountered that primarily when the ABS was working real hard on the front. Trying to get the rear wheel to lock up on its own, the ABS worked just fine. But I think the computer maybe gets a little bit overloaded when both wheels are trying to lock up. And it has to pay attention to a whole bunch of stuff all at the same time, and I think maybe it just got a little overwhelmed. That was repeatable, however, so it's possible that Indian could stand to update or upgrade the ABS computer to better handle multiple inputs in a panic stop situation. But the discs are nice, the feel is fantastic, smooth and gradual. Now, I did take the time to break my bike in properly. You know, brand new discs, brand new pads, brand new calipers, brand new fluid. All of that stuff works in concert with each other, and you do have to, once again, be realistic. Be realistic about your brand new motorcycle. So the next component up from the brakes is the suspension. Oh, let me say one more thing about the brakes. The brakes have, the ABS works leaned over. It's special, and this is a new thing that you're seeing in more high-performance motorcycles. As that system used to only be on race bikes, lean-capable ABS, but the cost is starting to come down. The components are starting to get a little more manageable size-wise. So lean-capable ABS, very fancy. I don't have the guts to get on the brakes hard when I'm leaned over in a turn, so I freely admit I have only tested the ABS in a straight line under controlled, more or less controlled conditions. I've had to make some quick stops, but I haven't had to make a panic stop in traffic under normal operation yet. Maybe that's because of the freaky looking LED headlight. So next up from the brakes is the suspension. This has the 43 millimeter upside down forks and full adjustability on both the front forks and the rear monoshock. And I haven't spent a lot of time playing around with the settings on the suspension because, to be perfectly honest, I've never had a bike that had a fully adjustable suspension like that. So some of its utility is lost on a rider like me that just wants to get on the bike and ride. But I will tell you this, the stock settings, like it came from the factory with everything in the middle, were already pretty good. And when I set the suspension pieces according to the charts in the owner's manual, I find the ride to be quite comfortable, and it really only gets a little bit uncomfortable when you hit a bunch of hard bumps in rapid suspension. So whether they're, you know, a potholey road or a really hard bump like that I just hit, or, you know, a bunch of bumps in a row, then you know, that's what you're gonna feel. But for just riding around, you know, the bike is planted. I feel confident in turns. Straight line performance is fantastic. It doesn't pogo, bounce, or wobble when it's not supposed to. And it has yet to fail to do anything I've asked it to do. And I give the suspension 1, 2 thumbs up. Now let's see. So suspension and brakes give way to handling. And yeah, the bike handles like a dream. Based on that flat track racer that Indian is using to dominate American flat track with, you know, Jared Meese and Breyer Bauman, Bronson Bauman, the Bauman brothers. And you see those guys on the podium 1, 2, 3 enough to know that Indian has provided them with a fantastic tool with which they can win races. The handling is fantastic. I've ridden the bike at a spirited pace. I've ridden it on twisties, neighborhoods, cities, obviously. I've ridden it on the highway, which is one place it doesn't, it's not the best as a highway bike. It's a naked bike, so there's not a lot of wind protection. It wants to go really fast. And when you go fast with no wind protection, it's not the most comfortable ride in the world. Talked a little bit about the ergonomics. Now that I've gotten to 1,000 miles, I am going to put the rally handlebar on it. That's what Indian calls it. It's just it's the same taper. It's made by Pro Taper, the people who make the stock handlebar. And it's just a little taller. I would like to sit just a tad bit more upright. But having said that, the stock bar is fine. It took a little adjustment, a little rotation, and I found a sweet spot for me. I don't have a lot of weight on my wrists. Certainly not enough weight on my wrists to be uncomfortable. So I'll leave it at that. But I think it would be nice to have the bar just a little bit closer to me to enable me to sit up just a little bit more easily. Clutch operation is buttery smooth. This is probably the easiest functioning cable clutch motorcycle I've ever ridden. And there's a good reason why. It has what's called a slip and assist clutch, which there's a bunch of videos on YouTube. You can look. The assist part doesn't really matter to me. It's the slip part that matters, because I like to say that deceleration is more important than acceleration, because you want to get out of trouble faster than you can get into it. So it's the slipper part of the clutch that is really important to me. But because of the slip and assist feature, you can use a cable instead of having to have a hydraulic brake to get smooth, easy action. The cable is easy to adjust the free play, and you don't feel like you got arm pump or Popeye forearm after a long day of riding in stop and go traffic. I mean, the clutch just operates fantastically. So clutch, brakes, throttle, right? Throttle. And if you know anything about the FTR 1200 and 1200S, it is that they are bred in the fashion, in the likeness of that track experience. The throttle response is, it's throttle by wire, first of all. On the S model, you get 3 riding modes: Sport, Standard, and Rain. I find the Standard option to suit me just fine. I've ridden it in Sport a little bit, and whatever it does is lost on me. I don't accelerate fast enough or ride hard enough for it to matter. Rain mode really kind of flattens everything out. If you're riding in less than ideal traction conditions, then the rain mode is pretty awesome. I've used it a couple times, but I leave it in standard most of the time because that works well for me. And I'm not going to lie to you, I've had the front wheel come up just a tiny bit a couple times, feel that front end get loose, enough to at least engage the wheelie mitigation aspect of the traction control system. So the wheelie mitigation definitely works in concert with the throttle to keep the front wheel on the ground. but it does want to come up in first gear. It wants to come up in second gear. And I'm going to tell you right now, I hope that my mom isn't listening to this, that front wheel wants to come up in third gear too. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not much of a wheelie guy, but it is kind of exciting to feel that front end lighten up and to get a little bit of wobble in your front end as that comes up off the ground, and feel the traction control. I don't know, I don't want to say it misses, but it affects the gas delivery just a little bit to keep that front wheel down. But you can still accelerate pretty hard on this thing and have fun. I mean, yesterday on a number of occasions I accelerated hard enough for these cheap mirrors to get out of whack. And a couple of times that was from a stop. Other times it was to pass vehicles. Here, I'll show you. I'll put in this video. Here's a pass that was 50 to 90 in about 1.2 seconds. I went around 3 cars. So there we got brakes. We got suspension, clutch, throttle. Talked about the ergonomics. So let me give you an overall impression. I absolutely love this motorcycle, even though it makes my butt hurt, which I'm going to fix. I absolutely love this motorcycle. I do feel like I'd have probably been happy not getting the race replica version, saving myself the, I don't know, whatever it was, $1,500 premium for the paint job and the Akrapovic silencers, mufflers that people have been drilling and taking the baffles out and other fun stuff. It is lovely in this livery. I do like the red and silver a lot. We're happy with that. I'm not sorry in the least that I got the race replica. I love the way the bike looks, but you know, from the saddle you can't really see the paint. The paint is beautiful, by the way. The metal flake, the black metal flake, multicolored metal flake, is just gorgeous. The sun hits it. It doesn't even have to hit it right. Just a little bit of sunshine and it draws that flake out like that's its job, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I would absolutely buy this motorcycle again tomorrow. I don't regret getting it not one bit. If you listen to, you can find out a lot about the whole buying experience and the new motorcycle experience if you're interested. I was interviewed by a guy called Chris Geis, who does a podcast called So You Want to Ride a Motorcycle, and the whole point of the show, at least from my perspective, was to talk about the new motorcycle buying process. I think he wanted to talk about the motorcycle itself a little bit more, so I kind of bulldozed my way into talking about what I wanted to talk about, but I think we got some good information and good perspective out of it. And if he wants to follow up with a show that's a little bit more specifically about this bike, I'll tell him to watch this video first to get an idea what things to ask me about. So I would buy this bike again. I think that the FTR 1200S is absolutely worth the money that it costs. I think it's a great deal for a phenomenal bike. If I had to put this bike on a 5-star rating, I would give it stock out of the crate. I give it 4.5 stars. And that half star comes off because of the terrible seat. Take the uncomfortable nature of a fat guy on a thin foam motorcycle seat out of the equation, This is absolutely 100% a 5-star motorcycle right out of the crate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, dames und herren, madame et monsieur, is my brutally honest review at 1,000 miles of the Indian FTR 1200S. As Ferris Bueller might say, if you have the means to pick one up, I highly recommend it.